It's just past 7:30 p.m. across India. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Nick Harper. Nick, good evening from New Delhi.
Good morning, Kanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll have the latest from the Middle East as efforts continue to secure an Israel-Hamas truce. And a new aid package is announced for Ukraine. But first, the headlines.
Hong Kong legislature unanimously passes new national security law, with leaders terming it a historic moment to safeguard national security. Qatar says it is cautiously optimistic about the Gaza ceasefire talks as Washington pushes Israel to refrain from launching a ground assault on Rafah. India slams China's defense ministry's claims over Arunachal Pradesh as absurd, says the northeastern state has always been a part of India. And top US congressional Republican Democrats say deal reached on spending that would keep the government funded through the rest of the fiscal year. Hong Kong's Legislative Council has unanimously passed the new national security law with all 89 votes in favour. Hong Kong leaders termed it a historic moment and said that the bill safeguards national security. The new law, which is set to be applicable from March 23rd, aims to update or create new laws and penalties to prevent treason, sabotage, sedition, with up to life imprisonment. DD India's Laura Westbrook sent us this report from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's leader John Lee addressed the Legislative Council, Hong Kong's mini parliament, and he called it an historic day. He said that he felt proud that Hong Kong had finally fulfilled its constitutional duty in enacting its own national security legislation. The government says that this will sit alongside the 2020 Beijing-imposed national security law. That came about after months of anti-government protests in 2019. Now, what's taken people by surprise is the speed at which this law has been passed. It was published by the government on March 8th, and lawmakers went through 181 clauses in just 6 days and held special meetings to really get this bill passed. And on Tuesday, it was passed unanimously by all lawmakers in Hong Kong's LegCo. Many lawmakers said that it was necessary to pass this bill in light of the 2019 anti-government demonstrations. This law does propose some new offences, and it also includes some quite hefty jail terms, including life imprisonment for treason. The government tried to pass this law back in 2003. Back then, there was significant public opposition to it. 500,000 people took to the streets and it was shelved up until now. Today, there haven't been any protests, although there was police presence outside the Legislative Council. Although some legal experts and lawyers have expressed concerns that the law could be vague and broad in some offences, and that it could have a chilling effect. The government, though, says it's necessary. Laura Westbrook in Hong Kong, reporting for DD India.
Moving further south in Asia, the Philippines' foreign minister said on Tuesday that the challenge ahead was how to sustain and elevate relations between his country and long-term ally, the United States. Philippines Foreign Minister Enrique Manalo thanked visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken for United States' support towards recent incidents in the South China Sea. Manalo added his country was committed to managing disputes in accordance with a rules-based order.
now is how to sustain and further elevate our alliance and partnership. Our discussion today focused on many issues. These include on defense and security engagement. We discussed ways to strengthen the alliance through better coordination at the policy and operational levels to ensure that it remains relevant and responsive to current, emerging, and cross-cutting challenges in the defense, security, and economic spheres, while staying true to our commitment to safeguarding and promoting peace, security, and prosperity of the region, always anchored on the rule of law.
Speaking at the same event, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said China's actions in the South China Sea had triggered a wider international reaction and that U.S. was engaged in intense diplomacy to reaffirm international law.
Shared concern about the PRC's actions that threaten our common vision for a free, open Indo-Pacific, including in the South China Sea and in the Philippines exclusive economic zone. Repeated violations of international law and the rights of the Philippines, water cannons, blocking maneuvers, close shadowing, other dangerous operations. These waterways are critical to the Philippines, to its security, to its economy, but they're also critical to the interests of the region, the United States, and the world.
China's foreign ministry in its response said that the United States had no right to interfere in maritime disputes between Manila and Beijing and that China would take necessary actions to defend its territory. Ties between the Philippines and China have soared amid repeated spats over disputed features in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, and Manila has accused China's Coast Guard of pursuing a policy of aggression. On to West Asia now. Hectic parleys are on in Qatar to secure a truce deal between Israel and Hamas. All this as Washington pushes Israel to refrain from launching a ground assault on Rafah. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, how involved is Washington to prevent a famine in Gaza?
Well, Tanvi, the United States on Tuesday intensified its efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, aiming to prevent a famine there. Washington has urged Israel to refrain from launching a ground assault on Rafah, which serves as the last refuge for over 1 million displaced civilians. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has revealed plans for a trip to West Asia, where he intends to engage with senior leaders of Egypt and Saudi Arabia to, he says, discuss the right architecture for lasting peace. Well, Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari in his weekly briefing in Doha said that Qatar is cautiously optimistic about the Gaza ceasefire talks, and the next major objective of ceasefire negotiations will be to send a counter-proposal to Hamas.
We are expecting that a counter-proposal would be presented to Hamas, but this is not the final step in the process, obviously. Until we reach a place where both sides can agree on language of an agreement, these steps back and forth will continue.
Well, let's get more on all of this and that potential truce with DD India's Alex Carrier. He's joining us live from Amman in Jordan. Alex, mediating countries are pushing for that ceasefire and for hostages to be released. How are the negotiations going, though?
Well, we heard cautious optimism from the Qatari Foreign Ministry's spokesperson. Cautious optimism because those talks are ongoing, but very clearly Majid Al-Ansari saying that it was too soon to celebrate any progress in these discussions. We know that the head of the Mossad, David Barnea, has left Qatar. He's left Qatar and is now heading back to Israel. But those technical teams, so officials from the Israeli side will be talking to mediators as well. Those technical teams are still negotiating, are still talking, trying to work out the details. The last framework we heard, this means that this would be an exchange between 40 Israeli hostages, elderly hostages, women and injured hostages being released, against 700 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israel. That was the request by Hamas, and they also demanded that Israel withdraw all of its troops from Gaza in the next phases of this agreement. Now, those will be sticking points that these technical teams are trying to resolve, but the fact that these conversations are ongoing, that these negotiations are happening in person for the first time since late February, really a significant step forward. We heard from Qatar. We know that the United States, as you rightly mentioned, is putting more pressure on Israel to reach some kind of ceasefire deal. That 6-week ceasefire allowing that exchange of hostages and Palestinian prisoners to happen, but certainly the prospect of Rafah looms very large over these negotiations, Nick.
And Alex, in terms of Rafah, Israel has talked about the possibility of a ground offensive, an operation in Rafah. What impact would that have on the truce talks if they were to go ahead with it?
Well, we heard from that Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson saying an operation in Rafah would make the humanitarian situation on the ground considerably worse, and they said it would result in atrocities that have not been seen before in this terrible crisis. That was Majid al-Ansari, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry of Qatar. He also said it would be difficult for negotiations to succeed within the framework of an operation in Rafah, so making it very clear that this deal could hinge on Israel not going into Rafah and withholding its troops. Now, we know just from this morning, Tuesday morning, that 14 people were killed in an Israeli strike in Rafah, so military action is happening, but that broader scale, that bigger military operation, which was approved by Prime Minister Netanyahu, still hasn't happened. We know that's also a real clashing point between President Biden, who said that the United States would not support Israel in a military operation in Rafah, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who said to President Biden in their phone call yesterday that not going into Rafah would make it impossible to eliminate Hamas, which is Israel's stated objective since the atrocities of October 7th and since those hostages were taken. So certainly that operation in Rafah still not fully deployed. If it does happen, that could jeopardize the negotiations for a ceasefire, and it could further strain US-Israeli relations, Nick.
Alex, thank you. That was Alex Carrier joining us live from Amman in Jordan. Well, Israel is going to be sending a team here to Washington to discuss a potential military operation in Gaza's southern city of Rafah. The decision was conveyed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to US President Joe Biden over a call on Monday. The two leaders also focused on efforts to increase aid to Gaza.
Discuss the latest developments in the war, including Israel's commitment to achieving all of the war's goals, eliminating Hamas, freeing all of our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel, while providing the necessary humanitarian aid that will assist in achieving these goals.
During a press briefing, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that President Joe Biden told the Israeli Prime Minister that he needs a coherent strategy for Gaza.
The President told the Prime Minister again today that we share the goal of defeating Hamas, but we just believe you need a coherent and sustainable strategy to make that happen.
Well, moving on, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday hit out at the West for helping Ukraine in its conflict with Moscow.
At one time, the West actively took advantage of various kinds of cross-border radical terrorist groups, including encouraging their aggression against Russia. It is natural that the neo-Nazi Kiev regime, again with the support of the West, and often at its direct instructions, switched to terrorist method.
Well, during the 20th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group at the US Ramstein Air Base in Germany, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced a new military aid package worth $300 million for Ukraine to support its ongoing conflict with Russia.
Ukraine won't back down, and neither will the United States. So our message today is clear. The United States will not let Ukraine fail. This coalition will not let Ukraine fail, and the free world will not let Ukraine fail. Just last week, the United States announced additional security assistance for Ukraine valued at $300 million. This is an extraordinary measure to support Ukraine's most pressing needs for air defense, artillery, and anti-tank capabilities. We were only able to support this much needed package by identifying some unanticipated contract savings. But we remain determined to provide Ukraine with the resources that it needs.
After the meeting, German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius announced an aid package worth $542 billion for Ukraine. He also said that the United States will remain a reliable partner and that Germany is firm in its stance that there would be no boots on the ground in Ukraine.
For this Ramstein meeting too, we have once again put together an aid package worth almost €500 million. That includes 10,000 rounds of ammunition from our armed forces stock. Its delivery will start at short notice, actually immediately.
European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell also announced an initiative on Tuesday aimed at supporting Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. Borrell proposed that 90% of the revenues from Russian assets frozen in Europe can be channeled into purchasing arms for Ukraine through the European Peace Facility Fund. The remaining 10% can be used to enhance Ukraine's defence industry. We're moving on to the United States now, and the top Republican and Democrats in the US Congress on Tuesday said that they've reached a deal to keep the government funded through the rest of the fiscal year that started back in October. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer revealed the agreement in a pair of statements just a little while ago. Current House rules require that lawmakers have 3 days to consider legislation before bringing it to the floor to pass it before the weekend shutdown deadline. But tensions continue as the nation's $34.5 trillion of national debt continues to grow. There are more primaries here in the US today, with 5 states holding contests for the United States presidential primary election process. Voters in the 5 states are choosing who they want leading the Democratic and Republican parties in November's presidential election. It comes a week after President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump reached the required number of delegates to become their party's nominee. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Tanvi, back to you in the studio.
Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on this show. Campaigning for India's parliamentary election gains momentum. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds roadshow in South India. Opposition leaders discuss election manifesto.
Whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. India's Foreign Ministry on Tuesday said that China was making absurd claims over Arunachal Pradesh. In response to media queries and comments made by the spokesperson of the Chinese Defence Ministry regarding northeastern state Arunachal Pradesh, the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs of India, Randhir Jaiswal, said, and I quote, "We have noted the comments made by the spokesperson of the Chinese Defence Ministry advancing absurd claims over the territory of the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. Repeating baseless arguments in this regard do not lend such claims any validity. Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India. Its people will continue to benefit from our development programs and infrastructure projects." Unquote. Now let's get you the latest on what's happening in India in the run-up to the world's largest democratic general elections. Campaigning is gaining momentum for the forthcoming parliamentary elections in India. Leaders of various political parties have started holding rallies and public meetings to woo the voters. Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a massive roadshow in the southern state of Kerala on Tuesday. The Prime Minister received a rousing welcome in the city of Palakkad in Kerala. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also visited the southern state of Tamil Nadu, where he received a warm welcome. Addressing the public rally, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that he has stressed that in the Hindu religion, Shakti means women power, the power of Indian mothers, sisters and daughters. The Congress Working Committee met on Tuesday and deliberated thoroughly on the party's manifesto for the upcoming elections. In his address to the Congress Working Committee meeting, Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge said Congress workers in every village and town will have to rise to take their manifesto to every household. As RITES, formerly known as Rail India Technical and Economic Service Limited, is all set to celebrate its 50 years anniversary. The Central Public Sector Enterprise under the Ministry of Railways on Tuesday outlined its achievements over the last 5 decades and the plans it has for the future. On the sidelines of the event, DD India's Dibyendu Mondal spoke to RITES CMD Rahul Mittal.
As RITES is about to celebrate the 50 years of journey in the industry, I'm joined by CMD of RITES. Welcome to Doordarshan, sir. Before we talk about the aspects of what RITES is, can you walk us through the 50 years journey and how it has been at RITES?
It's a very important milestone for us, and we are proud that we in April are completing 50 years. 5 decades of a very interesting journey. We were the first railway PSU, and the beauty of it is what started as a rail infra PSU today has presence all across areas of infrastructure. In our 5 decades, we have operated in more than 55 countries. And as we speak, we are doing about 700 plus orders. We are operating in more than 10 countries. And we have recently, in this last quarter, achieved the most important milestone of being a 1 order a day company.
What are the recent projects, if you could highlight, that you have got, or what are the projects that you're looking at in the coming future?
In export of rolling stock, we are proud to say that after a gap of about 3.5 years of the COVID and post-COVID era, we got the first order of 10 locomotives, export of 10 Cape Gauge locomotives to Mozambique at a cost of about 300 crores. And we were declared L1 in a 200 coach order for Bangladesh, tender for Bangladesh for about 900 crores. In project consultancy, we are operating right now in about 10 plus countries. We recently completed the Mauritius Metro. As we speak, we are doing the consultancy for an airport in Nepal, a highway project in Guyana, 3 projects in Bangladesh, a highway project, a railway project, a multimodal project. Most recently, an ICP in Nepal was inaugurated, which we were the part of.
Well, thank you so much, sir, and wishing you many more success, and congratulations on completing 50 years.
Thank you so much.
This is Dibyendu Mondal from New Delhi for DD India.
According to media reports, Brazil's federal police on Tuesday indicted the country's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, for suspected fraud on his vaccination records. An investigation by the country's Controller General's office had already shown that Bolsonaro's vaccination records were false. And now we take a look at what else is happening across the world. British FMCG company Unilever on Tuesday announced that it will spin off its ice cream unit and cut 7,500 jobs in a new cost savings program. The cuts will affect about 5.9% of Unilever's workforce of about 128,000 people. 13 miners were trapped in a gold mine after a rockfall in Russia's Amur region on Tuesday. The accident occurred at the Pioneer mine, one of the largest gold mines in Russia, based on processing capacity. Russian ministry said that communications were being restored and mechanized clearing of the transport slope is being carried out. Reports suggest that British actor Aaron Taylor-Johnson has been offered to don the iconic 007 tuxedo in the upcoming James Bond films. Eon Productions, known for producing most of the series adapted from Ian Fleming's novels, has reportedly offered Taylor-Johnson the role of James Bond. And now, as we end the show, we take you to the streets of Japan, where fictional monster Godzilla turned an honorary police officer for a day. Dubbed as the King of Monsters, the Godzilla marched through the streets of Tokyo to promote traffic safety. So that's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.